Hey, it's Scott Petrak. Welcome to the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. If you're new, welcome. If you listened before, thanks a lot for coming back. I'm here to talk Browns. We're 2 preseason games in, and we have the finale Sunday night in Atlanta. That means the season opener is 2 weeks away. I'm joined once again by good buddy Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. How are you, Dave?
Scott, I'm doing well because the weekend is here and I am ready for some real football. And that means what? We're 2 weeks away. I think 2 weeks from yesterday, right? We're taping this on Friday morning.
Yeah.
Isn't the opener 2 weeks from yesterday, Tampa Bay and Dallas, right?
Yep, 2 weeks from yesterday, which is something, because I have not watched a ton of preseason football outside the Browns. Part of that is because I'm so busy with the Browns. Part of it is, a lot of big name guys aren't playing, so it's tough to get a gauge on all the teams across the league. But once we get to Thursday, I'll be locked in. Thursdays, Sundays, and Mondays, right? 3 days a week from now on. Which
Isn't
is
it
great.
weird? Isn't it weird and interesting to see how the different teams are handling it? I think most teams are not really playing their starters, but you have the Chiefs and the Patriots and other teams that are, putting their guys out there.
It really is interesting, Chud. I get, and I think it was Joe Batonio the other day. We were talking to him, and he said it just shows you in life there's different ways to accomplish goals, and it doesn't mean one is right, and doesn't mean one is wrong. And if a guy like Andy Reid, who, in my opinion, is the second best coach in the league behind Bill Belichick, if he's playing his starters, I'm going to say, okay, there's a reason for that, and I'll buy that argument that it's okay to do. But I agree with the coaches that aren't playing their starters, and it depends on the situation, right? If you're a young team, you got to play the guys. You got a young quarterback, he needs to play. You need to protect him. You need to get him reps with his starting receivers. So, it's a different situation for each team. But if you focus back on the Browns, I don't think Kevin Stefanski is going to play the guys Sunday in Atlanta. We're going to get the announcement later today. This, like you said, this is Friday morning. We're going to get the official announcement later today. I'd be stunned if Stefanski said he was going to play his starters. It's just not the vibe of this training camp. It's not the vibe I've gotten from Stefanski for the last 3 weeks, or talking to his players, or coordinator Alex Van Pelt on Thursday. And I think the Browns are in a different situation than a lot of teams, right? They got everybody back on offense. They have their whole coaching staff back. They expect to make a deep playoff run. It's a 17-game regular season. The focus is really getting guys to week one as healthy as possible. And it's interesting, even if you talk to a coach, I think on a team that's playing its starters, they would add, what's the number one priority of the preseason? And it would be to not get guys hurt. So if that's the number one priority, then the best way to accomplish that is to not play your guys.
Well, and let me just say this. Last week on the pod, you said that they would not play their starters last week against the Giants, and they did not. And you were on the money, and you predicted that, and that's what you're going with here this week. And you know what? If you're wrong, you're wrong. But I agree with you. And I guess the bottom line is, if you're listening to this Friday night, Saturday morning, and it turns out they play their starters, hey, it is what it is. But all the signs point to them not playing, just like last week in your mind. So that's the call you're going with.
Yeah, for sure. And you can get the update on brownzone.com as soon as it happens, and Twitter. But I think another sign that pointed in this direction for me, Chud, is they lost Stephen Carlson, the fourth tight end. Well, so last week and that happened in the opener against the Jaguars. In the second game against the Giants, the Browns did not play Austin Hooper, David Njoku, or Harrison Bryant. And Bryant had played in that opener. And the reason is you want to get all three guys to the regular season. If you're that careful about your third tight end, I don't think you're risking Baker Mayfield or Jedrick Wills or any of the starters, because you'd have to play your starting offensive line if you play Baker Mayfield. I just don't think that follows the pattern that we've seen.
Do you feel like with Stefanski, and listen, we all are bowing down to him because he has changed Berea and changed the Browns. But at the same time, I'm not at the press conferences like you are, but I was listening the other day to the entire thing on the radio, and I was listening to you ask a couple questions. Do you ever feel like, and I don't know if this is the right way, do you ever feel like it's pulling teeth to try to get something out of them?
Yes, all the time. I do think, or number one, I think that's his goal, and he's too smart to deviate, right? There's some coaches that you ask the same question 8 times, and eventually they just cave. He's not shown any tendency to do that. I think he knows, or he feels, that less information is better. And as a journalist, I would argue with him on some of those principles. But we go into these things and we want to get information. We want to get good quotes for our stories, right? So there's a give and take there. There's a battle, and it's frustrating when you don't get the response you're looking for. Now, that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. That doesn't probably have any effect on wins or losses, which is what the fans care about. I do think we've seen a little bit more of his personality in year 2, and that could be whether it's year 2 and that's just naturally coming out, or the fact that for most of these interviews were in person, right? And it's easier, I think, to relate to somebody face-to-face is over Zoom. So I think that helps. But, just from a frustration standpoint, like some of it you want information, right? Is Denzel Ward going to practice today? And he doesn't answer, and then you got to wait to go see if he practices, right? Like, I'm not sure the point of not saying that. And then there's the other thing. If you ask about a specific player, I'm writing about player X. So I ask about player X, and it's hit or miss, but sometimes Stefanski will just go big picture, like, well, yeah, Jarvis does great, but so does everybody else on our team. Well, that's not helping my story if he says everybody is, a hard worker. You're looking for specific anecdotes and, specific information about a specific player. So, that can be frustrating, but, he's not the worst coach we've had to deal with. I don't think I'd have to go through my head. But, and it's done with a friendly manner. It's not like he's being rude. It's just.
Well, he's not Bill Belichick, right?
Right.
And
right.
I think everyone would sign up for Belichick to have Super Bowls, right? So at the end of the day, I don't think fans really care, how Stefanski handles his press conferences. But I just, for those that listen, if you ever listen, I can already, as you and I have spent a career listening to these, you can tell his crutches and how he diverts away. It really is amazing, not amazing, but I've already figured him out and
Sure.
how he just avoids the questions.
Yeah. and that's you're right. And that's a natural song and dance of news conferences, right? Reporters and subject. But you're right. The fans don't care. I think the only time the fans care at all is if the team's losing and then the coach isn't answering questions, and then you feel the tide kind of turn and
ding, ding, ding.
Right. But
yes.
We're not there with Kevin Stefanski, which is a good thing for everybody.
Right. Well, before we dive into what happened in Berea this week, just so what are you looking for on Sunday night? By the way, on Channel 3, WKYC, Sunday Night Football, Browns and Falcons. Got to plug my station there, Scott.
Yeah, it's a big time. It's a Sunday night game. Part of me, when I say that I don't think the starters are going to play, and I really believe that, part of me does wonder, well, it is the primetime national game. Is there any pressure to play the big guys? And I bet there's a little bit of pressure there on the organization. I just don't think that's going to sway the Browns. But what I'm looking for, it's a lot of the same stuff from the first 2 games, except there's such a sharp focus on who's going to make this roster, right? And this is the last chance. Friday is the last practice. Sunday night in Atlanta is the last chance for these guys on the bubble. And there's a lot of guys on the bubble. There just are. Maybe not a lot. Maybe 6, 8 guys, 8 jobs, 8 roster spots open. So I'm looking for all those competitions. And then again, I'm looking at the young guys. Does Greg Newsome II, I want to talk about him a little more. Does Greg Newsome II start? Well, if he plays, he's going to start. But does he play? Does he take another step toward being ready to be the starter week 1? Jeremiah Rusu-Koromoa, the second-round draft pick out of Notre Dame, he had a great opener in Jacksonville, right? 8 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack. And then he didn't have a stat in the game against the Giants. I think you need to see more from him because the Browns obviously are counting on him to play and to contribute when we get to the regular season. And you need him to be way more active than he was against the Giants, get off blocks better, make more impact plays. So it's about the roster competition and the young guys. And if we're talking about one, we'll get into the roster a little bit later, but one that jumps to the mind is the kicker situation, right? Cody Parkey went on IR and then reached a settlement. He's not kicking for this team. So Chase McLaughlin is the only kicker on the roster, and the Browns have not committed to him as the guy for the season. And Mike Prefer, the special teams coordinator, said Thursday, this is a huge week for Chase, which means Sunday night in Atlanta in a dome, right? So perfect conditions. He's got to make his kicks, and he probably needs to make all his kicks to guarantee a roster spot come Tuesday's cuts. And I think the Browns would keep him as opposed to going to the waiver wire or trying to make a trade because he has had a strong camp, but there's no guarantees with Chase McLaughlin.
They haven't brought anyone else in yet, have they?
They have not, which I thought they might. I thought you might want another guy to get a look at, on your campus, so to speak, for the last week, but they decided not to. But the guy's young, has not kicked a ton in the league. So I think they want the pressure of this finale and, okay, it's your job to win or lose. Now, if a guy got cut across the league that they really liked and they've been scouting, maybe they make that switch. I think it's way easier, and Mike Prefer said this, it's way easier to keep a guy that you've been working with for the last, 4 months, right, through off-season program, through training camp, through the preseason, because there is a rhythm, a timing with the long snapper and the holder. And that's not something to be undervalued. So it's just easier to keep McLaughlin, but you have to be confident in him, right? Because it doesn't do you any good to have familiarity if you don't trust the guy to go out and kick a 45-yarder to win the game in Kansas City. So he better make his kick Sunday night to even have a chance to stick around.
You had brought up Newsome. Has he clinched the starting job?
I think so, Chud. Now, when you're drafting on the first round, it sets up for that guy to be the starter in most situations. Number 26 pick out of Northwestern. Then he comes in, and he's been behind Greedy Williams on the depth chart all camp, which, Greedy had been here longer. That's the way a lot of coaches do it. You got to make the rookie earn the job. And I think Greg Newsome has earned it. I think he's played well in practice. He's making interceptions. He's getting hands on the ball. He's made plays in the preseason. He said his confidence took a huge leap when he had to go one-on-one against veteran receiver Marvin Jones in that preseason opener in Jacksonville. Did not expect to see him. Turns out he's lining up against a guy that's been in the league 9 years, and he held his own and was, quote, sticky in coverage. Said his confidence took a huge jump going into that game against the Giants, played well again. So I think it's his job. Now, sealing the deal is Greedy Williams has not practiced this week with a strained groin, which just helps as you're getting closer and closer to the season. But I think regardless of Greedy Williams' injury status, it would be Greg Newsome as a starter in Kansas City. And based on what he's done, because I think he's played that well, and when you talk to teammates and coaches, they can't say enough about his attention to detail and his willingness to take coaching. I think it was John Johnson III, the veteran safety, said, you watch his technique and it's exactly what the coaches tell him to do. And, when the Browns scout these guys, they're looking for that kind of guy to come in and be coachable, and they go the whole smart, tough, accountable. And I think Newsome really fits that profile. So, yeah, I think it's going to be him and Denzel Ward out there trying to keep up with those big time Kansas City receiver.
Yeah, it's gonna be a task, no doubt about it. On the opener, was that September 12th, right?
September 12th, and I'll be there.
September.
Chud.
Yeah.
I'm going
Are you
to
going?
the Open. Yeah, I am.
Awesome. Okay. That's great to know. So much better when you're there, right?
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, that's great. Can't wait for that. Staying in the backfield, what's the latest on Delpit?
Yeah, hasn't practiced since aggravating that hamstring. I want to say a week ago Wednesday. It was before the Giants got here. He had missed a couple of weeks, comes back, can't make it through 2 practices without aggravating the hamstring. And it's just a setback for him. Obviously, didn't play at all as a rookie with that ruptured Achilles. It's a setback for the defense. Now, maybe he'll be able to get back for week 1. We're 2+ weeks. If he practices 5 or 6 times, could there be a smaller role for him, a package of plays? Probably, if he's got to prove he's healthy. I think you really have to limit what he can do because, he only practiced a handful of practices a year ago as a rookie before getting hurt. I think he's taken less than 20 team reps this year. That's just not a lot of preparation for life in the NFL, right? The speed of regular season in the NFL. Never played in a preseason game. So I thought it was interesting. We talked to coordinator Joe Woods on Thursday. We talked to all 3 coordinators. It was the first time we talked to them in training camp. And Woods said that he will not be able to run his entire dime package until Delpit is back to normal, right? Ready to go completely up to speed. He said, we're going to rep it. We're going to have a portion of the dime package, but we can't do it without Delpit. And, I had some people on Twitter, well, why not? Why not just put somebody else in there? The fact is, if you're going to go 3 safeties, you have to really like all 3 safeties. You have to trust all 3 guys. They have to be playmakers, right? If not, you keep a extra linebacker, right? There has to be a reason to go 3rd safety over 2nd linebacker. And that's the reason they drafted Grant Delpit, number 44, is to be one of those guys. That's the reason they signed John Johnson III to a 3-year, $33.75 million contract. They traded for Ronnie Harrison to have playmakers in depth at that position, and you just can't put somebody else in. And I think Richard LeCount III, their 6th-round rookie out of Georgia, is going to be the 4th safety that they keep. And he's shown up in the preseason. He's had 2 interceptions. But I just don't think they're ready to use him as part of that nickel package, at least not an extensive nickel package. And that's disappointing for Joe Woods because we know Chud, and we talked about this. Last year he wanted to use him. And then Delpit gets hurt. Carl Joseph and Andrew Sendejo don't quite live up to what the Browns had hoped. So Woods has said I think he used the dime package 16 times all last season. And when he was coordinator with the Broncos, he would use it 400 times a season. Obviously, that's 1 a game. It's 1 a game versus 20 a game. That's a huge difference. So he's just not going to be able to run the package that he loves as much as he wants to week 1, and that's predominantly because Grant Delpit is hurt. Now, it does not mean we should vilify Grant Delpit. The guy's trying to come back from an Achilles and he strains a hamstring. That happens. It just means as we look at this defense and all these new pieces, we're not going to see, I don't think, the defense that Joe Woods envisions. We're not going to see it right away. And part of that's injuries to other guys throughout training camp and guys getting to know each other and a lot of new faces. And part of it, and a lot of it, is because Joe Woods needs Grant Delpit to be integrated and healthy and back to full speed.
Scott, explain that again. You said 3rd safety as opposed to 2nd linebacker?
Yeah. So when teams go passing situations, right, that's mostly when you see sub packages on defense, where you go 4 D linemen all the time. And then it's a matter of how many linebackers and how many defensive backs you have on the field. So the standard is 4 defensive ends, 3 linebackers, 2 corners, 2 safeties, right? That's your base 4-3. When you go nickel, you add a corner and you take a linebacker off the field. So it's 4 linemen, 2 linebackers, 3 corners, 2 safeties. When you do the dime, in the 3 safety dime, you take another linebacker out the field. So it's 4 linemen, 1 linebacker, 3 corners, 3 safeties. Now, you can also go a dime with 4 corners and 2 safeties, but Woods wants to run the 3 safety dime, the heavy dime, and that's 1 linebacker. Now, I think that linebacker will be Anthony Walker Jr. At some point, it will probably be JOK, right? You draft a guy in the 2nd round and trade up to get him. You want him on the field as much as possible. They love his speed, his coverage ability. So whether that's week 1 or week 6, whatever, or year 2, at some point, I think that'll be JOK. But so the question is, do you want Grant Delpit on the field versus that 2nd linebacker? And there's a lot of spots where Joe Woods does, because he likes the ability to cover tight ends or cover running backs. I think he believes it gives you more flexibility than necessarily that 2nd linebacker. And you can rotate your safeties and line 1 up close to the line of scrimmage and 1 deep and kind of mess with the quarterback that way. It just gives you more scheme flexibility than your standard nickel with 2 linebackers. But I think that's how the Browns are going to open the season. It'll be 4 D linemen. It'll be either Walker and Wilson or Walker and JOK, and then your 3 corners and 2 safeties, John Johnson III and Ronnie Harrison Jr.
All right. I hope everyone was paying attention. You'll be tested next week. Great information. It really is. JOK, freak injury we're dealing with here?
Yeah, it's when you talk about getting him ready for week 1, I almost forgot about that. Yeah, he had a weight room accident. Details are sketchy. Kevin Stefanski's not giving out any specifics, but he was in the weight room. I'm guessing a weight fell on his forehead. He needed stitches. So the helmet, he can't put the helmet on. And if you can't put a helmet on, you can't practice. So on Tuesday, he just watched practice. Wednesday and Thursday, he worked on the side with the athletic training staff, rode the bike, do all the things they do over there. Hopefully he'll be back out there today. I'm sure that they want to see him Sunday night, right? So even if he doesn't practice this week, I think you'll see him Sunday night so they can get him the reps. But it's just weird. You never think about that. But then I want to say 2 years ago, David Njoku had something, I think it was Njoku, had something similar, not the weight room accident, but stitches on his head or forehead that prevented the helmet from going on. So he couldn't practice for a while. It's just kind of one of those weird situations. But yeah, it's tough because, like I said, JOK did not play well in that 2nd game against the Giants and needs all the reps he can get. So I think if you're counting on him early in the season, you need to get him out there against the Falcons. So he needs to be able to get that helmet on without opening up the stitches and prolonging the injury.
Yeah, I just hope we're not continuing to talk about stuff with him and Delpit as well, where they just continue to miss time as the year goes on.
Yeah, and part of it is, in training camp, the team is more cautious with injuries, right? A guy pulls up with a hamstring. There's no urgency to get him back in practice. There's no urgency to get him ready for a game that weekend. So, I think, and you've seen it this week, Anthony Schwartz, the rookie receiver, came back to practice, came back to team drills, because there's all of a sudden that goal line is week 1 in Kansas City. Okay, what do we have to do to get him ready? Now, you don't put a guy out there if he's injured, right? If there's risk of, blowing out the hamstring or whatever the injury is. But if it's just tightness or a tweak, this is a time of year where guys start to fight through that. But you're right. I mean, it's the problem with Delpit is all we've seen is him being injured, right? If you put these injuries in year 6 and the guy's played his whole career, then it's just a blip. But until you build up that history of playing and having snaps and being on the field and fans and media can see you and they know what you can do, then it's tough. Then it feels like, man, this is a guy that we've only known is injured. And I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's certainly, I think, the perception of fans when they just haven't had a chance to see the guy play at all.
Good news this week, Tack is back.
Yes, that is big. That is big, Chud, because it was such a mystery. It was just personal private reasons. And, that's fine. People have issues off the field, right? People need to take care of themselves, take care of things. But when it's something like that and it's a little bit nebulous, you just never know when a guy's going to come back. So the fact that he was back over the weekend, is back practicing, hopefully gets in some team drills either today or next week. He should be ready to go week one. And I think he steps back into that role as the number 3 end. And he's out there in pass rush situations. And that's why the Browns signed him.
All right. I got 4 things left for you. So we're going to go 4 quarters here. All right.
All right.
Here. First quarter, Odell Beckham Jr. Will we see him in the first quarter against the Chiefs? Meaning, will we see him in that first game? Is he online to be back?
Yes. I have little doubt about that, Chud. I know Kevin Stefanski has not said that. He keeps going day by day, and we're doing what we can. We're just being smart about today. But, I've watched Odell run around for a month now, and I'm not a doctor, but he looks like he's ready to go. And he's looked that way for a while. And I think they're just being really cautious, bringing him along slowly, making sure Odell feels comfortable with the repaired ACL. But this week was huge for Odell. He got in 7-on-7 reps for the first time Wednesday. He took 5 more 7-on-7 reps Thursday, and then added 5 11-on-11 reps. And he's running full speed. He continues to work on the side with Baker. I've tweeted out a little video just of those 2 guys working on the side, and I caught the last couple of reps. And there was the reaction, the reaction on Twitter is always mixed, right? But part of the reaction is, oh, man, look at those guys working together, which was the point. And that's what Alex Van Pelt, the coordinator, stressed is these reps for these 2 guys is huge. The reps they're getting on the side by themselves during special teams drills. The other reaction was, oh, my gosh, Odell's not running that hard. And, Baker tells him to run to the end zone and Odell doesn't do it. I think, that's how it comes across to some people. And I understand that perception. I do think it's necessary to say it was the last reps of this series. Odell knew he was going to go in 7-on-7 right after that. Maybe he was saving himself a little bit. I've not gotten any sense during any of this training camp. And obviously Odell's a guy that you train your eyes on no matter what he's doing. He's not dogging it. He is running sprints by himself, or sprints might not be the right word. He's doing extra conditioning by himself. He's taking out those big hula hoops and doing agility drills by himself. He's catching passes from Baker every chance he gets. So I think it's great that those 2 guys are working together. I think they need to build up that chemistry, which obviously was an issue last year. They spent time in the offseason working toward that goal. All that being said, I am completely confident that Odell will be out there week 1. I would be almost maybe just as stunned if Odell doesn't play as if the starters do play Sunday night in Atlanta. That's how confident I feel like he'll be ready to go. Now, maybe he doesn't play 85% of the snaps like he would normally as they continue to ramp him up. But I'd be, like I said, I'd be floored if he's not split wide on the first snap of the game.
All right. Second quarter. Maybe I should have done downs here. First down, second
there you
down.
Go. Either one. You can ad lib. You can
whatever.
audible.
Yeah, whatever. We can go second quarter, second down. So we will, of course, talk way more about Odell as the weeks go on, and we've talked a lot about it. So we agree on most things typically. I wouldn't say we disagree about this, but we've definitely debated the Odell situation, and I've always said I need to see him prove it to me. And I'm staying in that camp that I need Odell to prove that he and Baker can exist and blah, blah, blah. Every Browns fan knows what I'm talking about there.
Right.
So that's one thing that we've really discussed a lot, and we'll continue. The other thing that we've talked about over the weeks that you and I have kind of debated is the identity of the offense. And you had said you thought they would go to more pass first, run second. My belief is that with Stefanski, the identity will always be the running game. Where do you stand with that now that you have watched training camp, 2 games, and have talked with the coordinators? Where do you stand on that?
I'm glad you brought that up, Chud. I moved a step toward your camp after talking to Alex Van Pelt yesterday. And I asked him specifically about that. And he said, our identity will always be running the ball and play action passing off the run game, but we're going to add new wrinkles, right? That's what he said. So I guess I think it's probably between our two thoughts. I'm not going to completely abandon that they're going to throw the ball more this year. I think you can have an identity as, hey, this is what we consider ourselves, is we're a run team, but we're willing to evolve. We're willing to be flexible, especially depending on the opponent. But I do think it's important that Van Pelt stressed it like he did. And at least that's the mindset. And that's what they're preaching to the players. So if the play calls in a given week go, quote unquote, my way, where they come out throwing and then turn to the run, I can see that happening. But you're never going to get to a spot where Nick Chubb doesn't touch the ball X number of times. And I think the same from Kareem Hunt. And if that's your base, and it is, because Kevin Stefanski tells Stump Mitchell how many times, Nick Chubb's going to get the carries before the game, right? We want him to get 16 or 17. We want Kareem Hunt to get 8 or 10. If the head coach is, dictating those numbers, then you're never going to stray from your base package, your base philosophy of running the ball, running the wide scheme, running your play action and your bootlegs off of that scheme. So I think you made a good point when we had this discussion a while back, Judd. Go.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to watch, no doubt. I mean, you got to be able to pass to win in the NFL. But, yeah, I'm glad you asked him that, and it's going to be fun to watch, no doubt. Speaking of fun, let's go to third quarter, third down. For the first time in maybe his life, Scott Petrak is going to be on the golf course having fun Labor Day weekend, because you're not going to have to worry about roster cuts on Labor Day Saturday, right? Because the cuts are different this year.
Yeah, they are. They're the final cuts. I mean, we say final, but obviously the rosters continue to be tweaked throughout the week and throughout the season. But the cut from 80 to 53 is Tuesday at 4:00. That's a deadline. So I think the Browns will start making cuts Monday. I think they'll finish the cuts Tuesday. Can they make a minor trade or two? Yes. Waiver claims Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, yes. But the majority of the action will happen Monday and Tuesday. And you're right, Judd. You've been through this plenty of times. The cuts used to be the Saturday, right? The preseason would finish that Thursday. Cuts were Saturday. They continued Sunday. And it was Labor Day weekend, like you said. And I can't tell you how many times I've been trying to cook out and had to, get on a conference call. Or, our good buddy Andre Knott got married. And I remember taking a conference call with Tom Heckert from my hotel room at Andre's wedding, because that's when cuts were. So this is more convenient from a sports writer perspective. And, I think from a fan perspective, it gives you a couple of weeks then to settle in with the final roster, because without that fourth preseason game, we have that big lag. We have 2 whole weeks from Atlanta to Kansas City. Now, those 2 weeks might drag because everybody's going to be gearing up for week 1. But from a roster perspective, it's nice. Fans can see the 53. And, to me, there's a lot of questions still to be answered, right? None of the big questions. We know who the quarterback is. We know who the receivers are, all that, or the starters are. But there's some bottom of the roster questions that have not been answered, at least in my estimation, through 2 games and a month of training camp.
All right, last thing, fourth down, fourth quarter. It's been a while since I asked you. I can't remember exactly what you did. I think you went 11 wins, but I'm just going to, right now, give me the Browns record. Scott Petrak, I'll give you what I think as well. Has it changed? Where are you at? And it can change before the regular season, but where are you at right now?
Yeah. Before I answer that, Chad, I did want to do one more thing on the roster real quick. I didn't want to let this go without it. I think we're talking about JoJo Natson. We have big roster questions for the final game. Does JoJo Natson make the team as a returner? I'm leaning toward no, but I think there's a chance he does. If he does make it, does that bump Demetric Felton, the rookie? I don't think so, but I don't know if he can rule it out. Is Kadarius Hodge on the roster? Is that sixth receiver? I say yes. What do they do at fullback? Do they keep Andy Janovich, or do they go with Johnny Stanton in the fourth, who can play some tight end like he showed last week? Do they keep running back Dearness Johnson instead of Felton or plus Felton? What do they do at that fourth and fifth DN spots? Do they keep the fifth guy? Like, these are the kind of things I think we're going to have to watch Sunday night and then Monday, Tuesday when the cuts come out. I just want to get that out there because as a beat writer, that's like my main focus right now is who's going to make this roster.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I'm glad you said that. And the cool thing about it is we're actually dealing with that as opposed to who's going to get cut and then they got to bring in like 5 or 6 more guys. Because how many times have we seen that where they were so weak that they needed to bring in guys cut from other teams?
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, we saw that over and over. They would churn the bottom 10, 12 guys of the roster. And then the guys that Browns would cut, nobody would sign, right? That's changed. Now people sign. I think either people will want to trade for guys that the Browns are going to cut, whether it's a defensive tackle or maybe offensive line, maybe receiver, right? The Browns are going to cut a team across the league with the need says, hey, we'll give you a conditional, 6th or 7th rounder for this player. I think that's possible. Or the Browns just cut guys and they wind up being claimed by other teams, and the Browns aren't then able to re-sign them to their own practice squad. So, yeah, it's just another example of how far this roster has come over the last few years. There's no doubt about it. So I'm glad I said that. And now just to get back to your question, I have not done my official season prediction yet. That will come. But I'm still thinking 11-6, Chud. I think there's a chance for 12-5. But 11-6, it seems more comfortable. It seems like I'm not stepping out on a limb there. That probably puts them in contention for the AFC North. I don't know if 11-6 gets it done. But that's why I'm going to waver. In the next 2 weeks, when I have to finally come up with the prediction, it's going to be 11-6 or 12-5.
All right. I'm going to go with 10-7 for now, but I could change. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm not saying I don't think they'll win 11 games. I'm just that's where I'm going now, and I got 2 weeks to adjust that. But we've got to put something out there right now.
Fair enough. I appreciate that, and I got an interesting stat. I got to look a couple things up before we talk about this. We can talk about this next week. Teams that break long playoff droughts and then 1 year, and then how they do the next year. And it's not a great stat. Like, if you're looking historically, it would suggest the Browns would take a step back. Now, we can make plenty of arguments why they're different than the teams that have had that similar dynamic where you break a drought and then what happens the next year. But it's out there, and it's not inconceivable that they could take a step back. We've seen it. The playoff teams in the NFL change from 1 year to the next. It happens all the time. It's usually like 50% of the teams that make it 1 year don't the next. So, that's why Kevin Stefanski keeps saying last year means nothing. It's all about this year. It's all about the work. We can't focus on going to the Super Bowl. It's about what we do today. So it'll be interesting, but I am also interested, Chud, to see if you change yours at all or if I change mine. That's really what these next couple of weeks are going to be about, is honing in on the final season predictions, how far I think the Browns will go in the playoffs. I mean, I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I'm going to have to solidify that over the next couple of weeks. So, Chud, thanks so much for joining me again. I really appreciate the time. We'll do this again next week, and we'll talk those roster cuts, what happens. We'll talk about the goal of getting back to the playoffs and just our overall season preview. Maybe players we're looking forward to watching, who we think is going to have a breakout. All those things as we have now more time before we get to that week 1 in Kansas City. So thanks a lot, Chud. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll do this again next week on the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast.